Good morning, Reform Wales. Well, it's a big day for us, and it's a big day in this campaign. But before I talk about Wales, before I talk about Dan Thomas, before I talk about our manifesto, I think I might just spend a couple of minutes on international affairs and the current standing of the United Kingdom in the world and its Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. I generally am somebody who is very, very deeply nervous of getting involved in foreign wars. The worry, of course, always is, what is the end game? What is the getting out strategy? And we've had far too much of that over the course of the last quarter of a century. But there is something fundamentally different when it comes to Iran. Gaddafi, Saddam, all these leaders, bad though they may have been, did not pose a direct threat to us, whatever the Labour Prime Minister of the day said. But Iran is very, very different, and I would argue that their funding of Hamas and other terrorist organisations since October the 7th, a couple of years back, has actually fundamentally changed much in our own country, including politics, where we now see sectarian voting, where we now see third world style election rigging, as we saw in Gorton and Denton just a few days ago. But that is nothing compared with the fact that the Iranian regime, aided and abetted by President Obama, the European Union, the British Foreign Office, Boris Johnson when he was Foreign Secretary, what we did was to appease Iran, to free up tens of billions of dollars with which they funded Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, their attempt to spread global terrorism. And they are desperate and in a hurry to build a nuclear weapon. And if there was one big justifiable reason why we should have supported the Americans and supported the Israelis on day one, if this war stops Iran getting a nuclear bomb, it will have been worth it. But what did our Prime Minister do? He said to the Americans, you cannot use military bases in the United Kingdom and you can't use Diego Garcia. It's funny, isn't it? All roads lead back to that dreadful Chagos deal. And then the Americans and Israelis did what they did. And then he said, not me, Gov. We're not involved. But we will put fighter jets into the sky in a defensive capacity. Quite how a fighter jet is defensive, I've never personally quite worked out. And now we learn that Ed Miliband led the sort of left-wing revolt in Cabinet. And now we find ourselves humiliated. What was for centuries the greatest naval nation on earth is now unable for up to a fortnight to send a Type 45 to Cyprus to defend, and remember this, British sovereign territory. British sovereign territory, with hundreds and hundreds of British people there working and their families. So we've managed to upset the Cypriots. We've managed to upset the Americans. We've managed to upset the UAE, Bahrain, and all the other Gulf states that are on our side. And now, even Spain, who said they'd have nothing to do with any of it, have this morning sent a destroyer to help defend Cyprus and help defend our base. So we're being defended by the Spanish, defended by the French, defended by the Greeks, and incapable of defending ourselves. Yes, I know that the last British government ran down our armed forces in a virtually criminal way. But it didn't take a rocket scientist to work out that America was going to attack Iran. It's been flagged for weeks. And yet we have a Prime Minister incapable of making a decision, dithering, pathetic in his response almost to everything. And I'm guessing it's because Morgan McSweeney is gone. You see, Morgan McSweeney would give our Prime Minister, McSweeney would give him a sheet of paper and he'd stand up at a press conference or at the Commons and just read it out. With McSweeney gone, we see the naked truth, that our Prime Minister is a follower and not a leader, that he and our reputation on the world stage is frankly going down the drain, and the sooner they're gone and out of office, the better it'll be for everybody. But the international dimension continues into Welsh politics. Now, it is true that a former senior figure, albeit very briefly in the party, from Reform Wales, did take foreign money, and he's in prison, as he should be. As he should be. But from Labour, we have had the moral high ground. Oh, yes. Don't vote for reform. They could be in the pay of a foreign government. And yesterday we learned that David Taylor married to a Labour MP. Matthew Applin, who used to work for Labour in the Senedd, and Stephen Jones, special advisor formerly to Labour First Minister Carwyn Jones and worked under Tony Blair in Westminster, have all been arrested on suspicion of spying for the Chinese Communist Party. The corruption within Labour from the Chinese Communist Party runs deep, so we will not hear in this campaign another word of condemnation or criticism from the hypocrites in the Welsh Labour Party. Now, I am very proud of the way our party has developed in Wales over the course of the last 20 months. And today really kickstarts our campaign for May the 7th. Today is the launch of this document. It's our Welsh Manifesto for May the 7th, and I commend it to all of you. Now, would you like me to run through the key points? Well, I'm not going to, because that's not my job. No, far from being the one-man band that much of the national media will tell you that we are, we're growing and we're developing our own leaders. And here in Wales, I'm very, very pleased to say that Dan Thomas is proving an excellent leader of our party in Wales. He is, in my opinion, more than capable. More than capable. He is more than capable, certainly far more capable than many First Ministers that you've had in Wales over the last 26 years of failure. And this document, this is not just the document of a party looking to make a splash. Not just the document of a party looking to get a handful of people elected. Oh, sorry, darling, you're having a rough morning. Did you get out the wrong side of the bed? It's all right. That's all right. You always get the odd screamer at these events. It's all right, you can go back to work. Go back to work. Well, I did say to her, go back to work, but of course, she hasn't got a job, has she? But it's okay, and we can expect much more of that. because there are many fearful of just how well we could do in these elections here in Wales. And you know, it'll be a defining election, not just for Wales, not just for us, but for the Prime Minister. And I'll tell you why I say that. Keir Hardie was elected back in the 1890s in Merthyr Tydfil. And if you go through the progression of the Labour Party, particularly from 1918 onwards, they've owned Wales, but in particular, they've owned the valleys. And those huge figures of historical significance in the Labour Party that have represented those constituencies, the Nye Bevans, the Michael Foots, the Neil Kinnocks, these are all giants, giants of the Labour movement. And if the Labour result is anything like the current opinion polls, Wales will end the premiership of Sir Keir Starmer. It'll happen after May the 7th. And we will all be better for it. The fact that he's a disaster in office and the party are failing, well, the warning signs were there. They've been there for 26 years. The way Labour has run Wales in terms of health, education and, frankly, virtually every other measure should have been a warning to the country not to vote them in on July the 4th, 2024. May the 7th will end Labour dominance in Wales and, in particular, the valleys. And if we get this right, we will get rid of the worst Prime Minister any of us have seen in our lifetimes, and boy, and when you think about it, that's quite something, isn't it? Because there's a fair bit of competition out there, you know. We have every chance, realistic chance, of becoming the biggest party in Wales when we wake up on May the 8th. But you never know. If this campaign goes well, if Dan Thomas performs as I believe he will, if you all do your bit, who knows? The ultimate prize could be in sight. And with that, I introduce you to the leader of Reform Wales to introduce the manifesto, Dan Thomas.
Thank you, everybody. It's amazing to be a party leader that has the full support of the membership. And I'd just like to thank Nigel for coming down to Wales yet again. This is the 6th time in 6 months that Nigel's visited Wales. Compare and contrast that. Compare and contrast that to Keir Starmer, who I think's been here twice. He didn't show up for the Caerphilly by-election. And he does not support Wales, unlike Nigel, and we all look forward in a few years' time to putting Nigel in number 10. And it's good to be back in Newport, a city that has a proud history of ordinary people taking on the establishment. In this very city, in 1839, the Chartists took a courageous stand to demand fair elections and reform of the democratic process. They were the original People's Army. And many of the democratic rights that we enjoy today, including the secret ballot, that was born from their courage. And we owe it to them and future generations to protect democracy and to ensure that undemocratic practices such as family voting have no place in these Senedd elections. And the Chartists were brutally resisted by the establishment of the day, and their allies in the press did everything they could to discredit them. But history teaches us a powerful lesson. A desire for democratic change always prevails. And today, the Welsh establishment is a tired Labour Party, propped up by Plaid Cymru. And for too long, they have taken Welsh support for granted, safe in the knowledge that there was no credible alternative. And the result? Large sections of the electorate have lost faith in politics. They have been disenfranchised by the back door. But thankfully, things are changing. There is a new People's Army ready to take on Labour and Plaid. In 63 days, we will have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for real positive change in Wales. Welsh voters have rekindled their Chartist spirit and they are ready to evict Labour from the Senedd. Wales is ready for change and Reform is ready for government. So today we launch our manifesto, an action plan to support Welsh families and Welsh communities and Welsh jobs. And that's what sets us apart from the other parties. While they promise hope, Reform promises action. Because Wales has lived in hope for far too long. Hope doesn't pay the bills. Hope doesn't create jobs. Hope doesn't reduce NHS waiting lists or improve exam results. Now is the time for action. Now is the time for a Reform government that will put the people of Wales first. And we will put the people of Wales first by only spending your taxes in Wales. Reform will not be sending your money abroad to fund foreign aid and tree planting in Uganda, and we will close those Welsh government offices in China. We will spend your money where it's needed most, on our NHS, our schools, our own children, our own elderly. We cannot justify sending your money to other countries when 1 in 4 people are on NHS waiting lists and 20% of our children are leaving primary school illiterate. And as a united kingdom, we cannot justify the billions of pounds that we spend on illegal economic migrants who come here on small boats organised by organised criminals. The equivalent of 15% of the Welsh government budget is spent by the UK on so-called asylum seekers. And the nation of sanctuary encourages illegal migration. So Reform will scrap it in our first weeks of government. And we will prevent hotels and HMOs from housing illegal immigrants and asylum seekers. And if we must amend planning law or pass new legislation to achieve it, then so be it. And to those who say that immigration isn't an issue in Wales, it is amongst the top 3 concerns of the Welsh public, and Reform is the only party that is listening. And my message to certain sections of the media and our political opponents: do not conflate concern over immigration, both legal and illegal, with racism or intolerance. It is perfectly possible to embrace our long-standing, legally established and integrated minority communities whilst wanting to control immigration today. And many of our Reform supporters are from such communities. Now, Plaid Cymru will use the word division very freely. It's their second favourite word after hope, which is ironic, given their hope for independence will divide the United Kingdom and the Welsh public. the Plaid leader says he would use his time in government to make the case for independence, but I'm sorry to break it to him. The Welsh people want the Welsh government to focus on the day job, to fix the NHS, improve exam results and get Wales building. They want a government to make Wales better off, not to break us away from the Union, which will do the opposite. Reform will focus on the powers we already have to make lives easier for hard-working families, to help with the cost of living. For 7 years, the Welsh Government has had the ability to cut income tax. Well, Reform will be the first party to use this power and reduce income tax by 1p in the pound at the end of our first term. This will put £400 back into the pockets of working families, or the equivalent of a £600 pay rise for the average family. And we all know that energy bills are too high, driven up by net zero policies and dependence on expensive energy. So Reform will scrap net zero targets and expensive green subsidies. We will encourage and facilitate reliable nuclear energy by working with the UK Government to expand nuclear energy capacity in Wales. And council tax is one of the largest household bills for most families, and Welsh councils have been fleecing residents with an average council tax increase of over 7%. Reform will end this extortion. We will cap annual increases at 4.99%, and if councils treat that cap as a target, we will lower it further. Now, there's always a limit on what government can do to improve family finances, and strong job opportunities are the real path to doing well in life, and jobs are created by business, not government. So Reform will make it easier for companies, large and small, to invest and operate in Wales. CBI Wales recently confirmed that congestion on major Welsh roads is a major obstacle to economic growth. So unlike Labour and Plaid, Reform will be ambitious for Wales. We will not shy away from major infrastructure projects because the prize of real economic growth is too great to forfeit. Reform will reverse Mark Drakeford's ban on building new roads, and we will build the M4 relief roads. We will upgrade the A470 and the A55 North Wales Expressway. Improving traffic flow will help increase the flow of inward investment, and this is a simple fact that Labour and Plaid cannot grasp. And Labour will listen to the 500,000 people who signed the petition to scrap the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. In the first few weeks of a Reform government, we will start the process of reversing this blanket speed limit, and we will also stop councils introducing pay per mile and road user charge schemes. Those schemes are simply designed to extract more cash from drivers. So Welsh drivers will no longer be cash cows for Labour and Plaid Cymru councils. Our message to Welsh drivers is simple: vote Reform to end the war on motorists. And for too long, Labour and Plaid have been happy for Wales to provide low-pay, low-skilled workforce. They're frightened of what will happen if people have the opportunity to do well for themselves. But Reform embraces success and ambition, and we know the people of Wales will thrive if only they have the right opportunities. So we will encourage and incentivise companies to relocate their head offices to Wales, as well as their factories and workshops. We will do all we can to stop the brain drain and provide our school leavers with lifelong careers here in Wales. And Labour and Plaid have been holding Wales back, and now is the time to break free from their grip and let Wales thrive. And we want Welsh hospitality and tourism to thrive. So we will use Welsh government powers to ensure hotels, pubs and restaurants aren't paying more business rates than their counterparts in England. And we will scrap the tourist tax. Now, we are very fortunate in Wales to have farmers who work to high standards, producing the best lamb, beef and dairy in the world. Yet we are becoming increasingly dependent on imported food, a huge risk in these uncertain times. So Reform will work constructively with farmers and farming unions to safeguard food security, grow exports and strengthen farm-to-fork supply chains. We will reform the sustainable farming scheme and work with farmers to reduce paperwork and livestock constraints. We will incentivise food production and give farmers more choice about the environmental work that they sign up to. And for too long, agricultural policy in Wales has been driven by ideological targets and excessive regulation, and this has led to falling confidence, rising costs and growing uncertainty across rural Wales. Reform will change that. We will continue to press the Westminster Government to reverse the punitive changes to inheritance tax. We will provide multi-year funding for young farmers' clubs and their events, and we will set up a new national rural apprenticeship scheme that will create employment opportunities for young people and boost labour supply in rural areas. Reform will help the farmers of today whilst nurturing the farmers of the future. And Wales has a proud tradition of people caring for each other, yet our NHS is failing people who rely on it the most. Hospitals are struggling, ambulances are delayed, patients wait for months for the care they desperately need, and children, the elderly and the most vulnerable are left waiting in corridors while overworked staff do their best under impossible conditions. Reform will keep the NHS free at the point of use. Free at the point of use while taking decisive action to fix what is broken. And that means cutting waiting lists, ending corridor care and restoring safe, high-quality standards in our emergency departments. We will expand surgical hubs and rapid diagnostic centres so that treatment is delivered quickly and efficiently. We will deliver a new dentistry school in North Wales to address the serious shortage of dental practices there. We will support our NHS workforce, doctors, nurses and carers with training, flexible working and better retention measures. Our top medical talent must stay in Wales and not be pushed into the private sector. And GPs will have the resources they need to serve communities, and pharmacy services will help reduce pressure on overstretched practices. Cancer care will no longer be a postcode lottery. We will launch a 10-year cancer survival plan, investing in diagnostics, treatment and mobile screening for the communities that need it the most. And the people of Wales deserve a healthcare system that works for them, not one that lets them down. Reform will deliver that system, but we won't micromanage it. And I believe that politicians should not be managing public services. There are well-paid executives who should be doing that, and it is the politicians' job to hold them to account and set high expectations on behalf of the people. As First Minister, I will set the highest expectations for public sector directors that Wales has ever seen. And there will be real consequences for failure because we're talking about people's lives, their health, and about our children's future. Every decision, every action, every delay, it has a human cost. So those at the top will be held accountable. And if you are paid like a chief executive, you must perform like one. Our education system is struggling. Children only get one chance at education, and we cannot afford another 10 years of drift. So we need to support our teachers, restore standards and discipline in schools. On skills and apprenticeships, Labour are busy massaging the figures, which is an acknowledgement of failure. Wales needs honesty in reporting and seriousness in delivery. Skills policy must be about real outcomes, not spin. And reform supports our nurses, teachers, police officers, social care staff and council workers. They work hardest when the system fails. They deserve leadership that backs them, not red tape that burdens them. And our manifesto is a serious action plan to turn Wales around, to fix public services, restore pride and ambition, and get Wales building again. It is rooted in common sense, fairness and accountability. And Reform's leadership in Wales will be bold. It will be demanding. It will serve the people or answer to them. We will create a culture where results matter, excellence is rewarded, and failure is addressed swiftly, not brushed aside. Ministers will intervene when the public sector isn't delivering. If a council isn't delivering enough homes, we will step in because we must address the housing shortage. And reform will prioritise local people and veterans for social housing. And we will ensure that new social housing is the same quality as its private counterpart, so we can all be proud of where we live, regardless of whether we rent or own. The simple truth is that Plaid and Labour have lost any sense of pride. They're out of touch and out of time. After decades in power, they defend systems instead of reforming them. They explain failure instead of fixing it. And Plaid Cymru has been part of this failing system. They supported Labour through a formal cooperation agreement. They've had the chance to challenge a failing system, and they chose to sustain it. Plaid cannot deliver the real change that Wales needs because we cannot pretend the parties that broke Wales are the solution. We know that this is our last chance to turn Wales around, and we take that responsibility seriously. We ask for your trust. We are ready to earn it, ready for government and ready to act for you. Wales has been let down, but our best days lie ahead. Wales needs ambition. Wales needs action. Wales needs reform. Thank you.
Dan, thank you. That was terrific. It was uplifting. It gives positivity. It gives direction. And, you know, if anybody thought it, we're not a party of protest. We're a party that is about putting things right. We are well led. We've got a great slate of candidates, a growing membership. I think we can do well in Wales, don't you? Yes. OK. We now have some questions from the press. Where are the press sitting? I can't. Over there. Right, fantastic. Starting off, somebody from BBC Wales, either Gareth Lewis or Daniel Davis.
Morning, both.
Give them a chance.
Yeah, just a question for each of you, if I could. Mr. Thomas, first of all, 5 years ago, Reform pledged to halve the number of Welsh local councils. We attempted to be that radical in this manifesto, and you obviously weren't, so why? And for Mr. Farage, lots of the manifesto actually looks very similar to the Conservative manifesto published earlier this week. Were you tempted to be more radical?
I'll answer that first. The Conservative Party... Oh, I remember them. They used to be a big national party, didn't they? Actually, it was very, very funny. It was very, very funny that we pre-announced this event. And obviously seeing it, the Conservatives panicked and decided at a rush to get theirs in first. Forget about the Conservatives. They will be all but obliterated in Wales on May the 7th. And I would say this. In over a quarter of a century of devolution for Wales and Scotland, what you've seen again and again and again is devolution being used by the Labour Party, the SNP, whoever it may be, in conjunction, of course, with Plaid here. You see devolution used as a means of government getting bigger and making things more expensive, and in the case of Scotland, using those freedoms to put taxes up. If using devolution to cut income tax isn't a radical departure from the last 25 years, I don't know what is. Councillors.
And on the question of reducing the number of councils, just because it's not in the manifesto, it doesn't mean that we won't necessarily do it. But we need to pick our battles in Wales. So we look at the Conservative manifesto, and if you look at the other parties who've been launching their campaigns recently, they're promising too much and they won't deliver it. So we will be sensible and we will be proportionate in the kind of change that we achieve. Our focus is obviously NHS waiting lists, education, building the M4 relief road, helping farmers. The last thing we want to do is to go to war with 22 councils, although we will encourage efficiency savings. So you've got 22 councils, 22 planning authorities, 22 HR departments. I go on and on and on. Okay. These councils should be sharing services behind the scenes. And they've got in my opinion, they've got two ways of doing that. They either grow up and come together and do it together via the public sector, or they can outsource it. They're the two options. I would prefer that they do it together and have in-house shared services. So we will be speaking to councils about how to make efficiencies. And the reason why we've capped council tax is because councils have had no incentive to be efficient, because it's in their DNA, especially if they're run by Plaid Cymru and Labour, it is in their DNA just to rack up rates and put the cost onto taxpayers, rather than making those hard decisions that I've had to make as a council leader in order to cut council tax and in order to save tens of millions from the back office. So halving the number of councils isn't a priority, but efficiency in the Welsh public sector is.
Good answer. Good answer. Thank you. Next up, we have Katie Fenton from ITV Wales.
Nigel Farage, you spent much of your speech this morning talking about events in Westminster, attacking Keir Starmer. Dan, you talked about getting Nigel into number 10. This is a Welsh election, it's about Welsh people. Or is this just about getting you to number 10?
It's a Welsh election, but I'm afraid whether you like it or not, it doubles up as a referendum on Keir Starmer's premiership.
And the people of Wales want Nigel in number 10. Okay. I've been campaigning with Nigel in Wales, and he's very popular, and certainly more popular than Keir Starmer, which is not hard. Which is not hard, to be fair.
Not a very high bar, is it?
But you are right. This is, of course, the election to the Welsh Parliament, and that's what we're focusing on. But we will need, a Reform government in Wales will need to work with a UK government, and it'll be best if we work with a UK Reform government. Simple as that. We'll be able to work with each other on funding for the M4 Relief Road. We'll be able to work with each other on building nuclear energy capacity and all sorts of other infrastructure projects, because we share the same values of ambition for this country, for Wales and for the UK.
Okay, thank you. Jacob Morris, S4C.
Yes, a question to the both of you. You've said previously, Mr Farage, that you don't believe in the target for 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. Does that still stand? And you mentioned in the manifesto that you want to end the Quango carousel. Does that mean that the future of the Welsh Language Commissioner, what does that mean for the future of the Welsh Language Commissioner?
From what I can understand, the Welsh language is thriving in Wales. It's being taught in schools. It seems the under 40s speak a lot more Welsh than many of the over 40s in certain parts. I would say let Welsh culture, let the Welsh language thrive. I don't see that it needs targets or quangos. If it's happening because people want it to happen, and I think it's a very good thing. I've no problem with it.
Look, there's plenty of examples of arbitrary targets where they don't work, and in a decade or two time they get reversed. Look at the 50% target with regards to university admissions. It was completely wrong, ill thought out, and other things fell aside because of it. And if you have a target in the public sector, it becomes a cottage industry of people working to hit that target. Absolutely, we support the Welsh language, but we don't think the target is necessary. It's organically, on its own, doing very well.
Yeah. It's happening anyway, isn't it? Okay, thank you. Andy Davis from Channel 4.
Dan Thomas, you're proposing cutting 10%, I think, of the civil service. By my calculations, I think that's about 500 job losses. Is that correct? And if so, are you proposing any further job losses across public services in Wales? And Nigel Farage, you've said that you will scrap net zero targets in Wales. How do you square that with the long-term projection that climate-related damage could cause significant harm to UK GDP by the early 2070s?
You know, if you actually look at this and take a long view, you know, in the 1970s, global temperatures were cooling. There were concerns about a future ice age. Since the late 1980s, the global temperature is rising. You're right, it is rising. It's rising roughly 1/4 degree every decade. That's a pretty accurate scientific measure of what has been happening over the last 35 to 40 years. This is not unusual. You know, when the Vikings went to Greenland, it was green. That's why it's called that. You know, we've then had cold periods where elephants walked across the Thames at Blackfriars. The climate is always changing. The debate is it man-made CO2 that is changing the environment? The other phenomenon, by the way, since the 1980s, is global greening. Because there's more carbon dioxide, there's more green stuff on the planet. So it isn't necessarily all catastrophic. It all depends what part of the world you live in. All I would say on the science is I don't know. But let me tell you what I do know. What I do know is that deindustrialising South Wales, closing down primary steel production in Port Talbot, seeing that manufacture exported to India, and then the products made under lower overall environmental standards, and then the steel shipped halfway around the world back to Wales, isn't actually reducing carbon dioxide emissions. And you know, I am an environmentalist. I've always been an environmentalist. I'm genuinely worried about the state of rivers, the seas, and we'll talk more about that as this campaign goes on. A lot more about that. I'm concerned about plastics. I'm concerned about many things. But if we obsess on carbon dioxide, we forget many of the other things that are going wrong within our environment. We are 0.8% of the world's CO2 production, and for the price of being virtuous, we're deindustrialising the nations of the United Kingdom at massive economic and strategic cost to this country. So that's it. 10%.
And on the headcount of the civil service, I think 10%. We put it around about 580 posts, and we'll do all we can to redeploy to help into other jobs. But ultimately, we need to make efficiencies in our civil service in Wales. It's become bloated, it's become inefficient, and we need to divert that money into frontline services.
Yeah, and of course, modern technology means that lower headcounts in the public sector actually become far easier without any loss of efficiency. Eleanor Story, Press Association.
Hi, my question's for Mr. Farage. Following the arrest yesterday, do you think there should be an inquiry into foreign interference in politics, and specifically in Welsh politics?
Yes, I do. Now, the government have announced an inquiry into the funding and interference in British elections and politics, which is timed to come out just before the May the 7th elections. All because they thought that with one bad apple called Nathan Gill, they could use all the resources of Whitehall to produce a damning report about us just ahead of the May the 7th election. So I would say to the government, you're absolutely on the right track. And that I think efforts to discover foreign interference at all levels of British politics are vital, and in particular, Wales, because this is the only part of the United Kingdom with a parliament without a proper register of lobbyists. So if you're a bad actor from anywhere in the world that wants to get in, you'll find it much harder at Holyrood, much harder at Westminster, but in Wales, they've left the door unlocked, and that's something else we must deal with. I welcome this report in full before May the 7th, absolutely.
And can I add, it is on our manifesto to create such a register in Wales. That will be happening. And we'll also be very interested to know what's been happening in those Welsh Government offices in China. And that should be included in any report.
Very good. Rhys Owen from Golwg.
Good morning. Nigel, public trust in politics is at an all-time low. And, I mean, you have obviously raised the concerns regarding foreign interference today. Obviously, we saw, like you mentioned, with Welsh Labour and the connections that the three that got arrested to Welsh Labour with potentially or allegedly spying on behalf of China. With reform, obviously you mentioned Nathan Gill. What steps are you taking to make sure that many of these first-time candidates, which I'm sure there will be many who are standing for the Senedd, are correctly vetted to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Because if it does, it just reduces that trust even further, doesn't it?
I don't disagree with that at all. And that question is a very fair question to ask any party that's putting up candidates for May the 7th. We are being as careful as we possibly can be through vetting, credit checks, criminal record checks. In fact, our candidates that will be standing for us in these elections, all 96, will have been through a very, very rigorous process. Of course. Of course. I know, and actually, some of them are still bearing the scars of the cross-interrogation they've been through. They've been through media tests, by the way, quite unlike anything any other candidate's ever been put through before. Wherever there are large groups of human beings, you'll get one or two that are not as they ought to be. That applies in every walk of life. Even within families, there's the odd black sheep here or there, you know, and we all know that. Labour's problem is they've tried to say that we are holier than thou, that we are above all of this, and it's the awful corrupt Tories, and now it's reform with a bad apple, when actually, when it comes to China, and even if you look at some of the legal funding of MPs' offices from Chinese sources, you begin to ask yourself a very, very big question. And then you look at Jonathan Powell. Now, I might get sued here, but who cares? Then you look at Jonathan Powell, senior figure in the Blair government, national security advisor to Keir Starmer, who shortly before he took the job had a lobbying company engaged with Mauritius and with China, and then was the man selling the Chagos deal to the Americans on the basis that it should happen. I accept there's corruption everywhere you go in life, but for the Labour Party to pretend that they're exempt from this, it may well turn out they're the worst of a lot.
And, can I, as a fellow candidate who's gone through the same process, I think it's been the most thorough vetting process of any political party. And I think that's right, number one, for integrity, for those who stand for election. But also, as reform, we will get more scrutiny than others.
Yeah, we will.
Inevitably we will. But our candidates have been through some quite vigorous employment checks, 20 years employment history checks, DBS checks, amongst others. So I think we are the most vetted bunch of candidates of any political party, and I'm really proud to be standing shoulder to shoulder with them in the forthcoming weeks for the election.
Conor Gagasi from Wales Online.
Hello both. You're pledging to upgrade hospitals. The biggest hospital in the country, the University Hospital of Wales, is in a completely dilapidated state. Reports have shown it's been unfit for purpose for years and is massively compromising patient safety. Labour has promised to build a replacement for that hospital. Will Reform commit to doing the same, and if so, how will you pay for it?
So we will carry out an audit of the entire NHS estate, and we will start fresh. And if we need to replace it, we will. But if we need to upgrade, we'll upgrade. But we will do our own audit first. There are certain things we can do with the public sector estate that will bring in extra money to refurbish certain units. We want to focus on mobile screening as well as part of our 10-year cancer survival strategy. But we're not just going to just take Labour's plans and carry on with them. We will review them because a lot of them have fallen short in the past. So we will do our own thing. But absolutely, we will invest in our health infrastructure.
Bronwyn Weatherby from LBC.
Mr. Farage, LBC has learned the Home Office is piloting a scheme where families whose asylum claims have failed will be paid up to £40,000 to leave Britain rather than dragging their cases through the courts. The Home Secretary says this will save taxpayers £20 million on hotel costs. What's your reaction to this? Does it potentially increase the pull factor to the UK? And Mr. Thomas, your manifesto includes prioritising Welsh people for social housing. How exactly would you define Welsh for eligibility purposes, and how would you implement that within the equality laws without discrimination challenges?
If you come to Britain illegally and then are deported and given cash to go home, then logically the next day you come back again, don't you, and repeat the whole thing over. There are many things on the big top line that Shabama Mahmood says that I absolutely agree with. For example, restricting student visas from countries where people just overstay. And therefore student visas become a form of illegal immigration. Trouble is, the 4 countries she's chosen to put the ban on only constitute 3% of those who get student visas. The real problem, we're being frank about it, the real problem is Pakistan. 9%, let's call it 10%, of everyone that gets a visa, holiday visa, student visa, work visa, whatever it is from Pakistan, 10% illegally overstay. If you want to make a difference, you've got to take on countries like that, not countries like Sudan, where the numbers coming are absolutely tiny. And look, at least her rhetoric is good. Much of it's not deliverable because we're stuck inside the ECHR. But it's also not deliverable because we've got a Labour Party that is going towards the left and being dragged there by Zach Polanski and the heroin mob, I mean, I suppose, whatever floats your boat, I don't know, but it's not quite for me, I've got to tell you, Dan. But the Greens are dragging Labour leftward, and sectarian politics is dragging Labour leftward. You've now got 50 Labour MPs who will lose their seats if the Pakistani, Kashmiri, Bangladesh community in their constituencies block vote Green, and therefore anything worthwhile that Shabama Mahmood tries to do will simply get vetoed by the Parliamentary Labour Party, and the problems within Britain from illegal immigration and excessive legal immigration will, I think, continue to get worse. I wish that wasn't the case, but I believe it to be the truth.
On Welsh homes for Welsh people, so we will prioritise those who've lived in Wales for 10 years. Social housing, there is a shortage, and we have to ration it, so we have to have some residency requirements. So we think the 10-year rule is enough, and we'll also prioritise veterans who've served this country as well. Yep. And one thing we won't do is discriminate against people who may or may not speak Welsh. There was a town council, I think up in Gwynedd or somewhere, that proposed that social housing would only be allocated to Welsh speakers, and we think that is divisive, and we will not be doing that. So I can assure you, we will have a very fair housing policy that will put Welsh people and veterans first.
Very good. Okay, let's go to Philip Case from Farmers Weekly.
Hello. A question from Mr. Farage. Our farmers feel badly let down by many politicians. Why should they trust you? And also a question from Mr. Thomas. Bovine TB continues to cause huge devastation across our rural and farming communities. What would a Reform government do from day one to really tackle this scourge?
Philip, I completely understand the premise of the question. Why should farmers, or frankly for that reason, any other group of people in the country believe what they're told by politicians? Farming has been through a tough time because we'd had basically half a century of being in the Common Agricultural Policy and the Common Fisheries Policy. And nobody in Whitehall was ready for the Brexit vote. And we've struggled to readjust. And I think the same goes actually in many ways for devolved powers in these areas as well. All I will tell you is this. I actually believe that the Labour Party is on an all-out mission to scapegoat the countryside, farmers, country pursuits in the most unnecessary, in the most appalling way. They propose taxes that weren't clearly explained in the manifesto. They even go after things like trail hunting. I mean, frankly, you might as well ban dog walking. I mean, the whole thing's unbelievable. I am a country boy by upbringing. I understand these things. And if you look at our list of candidates, you will find people still actively engaged in farming in Wales and from families that have been farmers in Wales. And I tell you something, you are more than welcome to meet any of them, interview any of them, understand how we want to simplify. I mean, some of the paperwork with the sustainability scheme, I was showed it by some North Welsh farmers. I simply couldn't believe. It was classic. I'm in an office in Cardiff, think. So look, we will be on the side of rural communities, and no other party leader has stood up for country issues in the way that I've done for a quarter of a century, all right?
And you're quite right, the politicians have let down the farming community. Reform will change that. One of my closest friends who's in the audience today, Ian, he's a farmer. I hear about it when we go in the pub. I hear about it all the time. I understand the problems. And you say, what will we do on day one? What we can't do is have politicians micromanaging these things. So on day one, bring the farmers in, bring the farmers' unions down to the Senedd, and we will talk about a solution, a practical solution that works on the ground, because we know how devastating the problem is. So I think that's the main thing, is that we will talk and we will work with you, and we won't work against you, and we won't be setting you off to do other things that have nothing to do with protecting the farm and producing food. Yeah. So I think that's the main thing. Let's work together. Let's restore that relationship between government and rural Wales.
Yeah. And in a very uncertain world, where much of the debate in the last 2 days is about shipping routes, yeah, I mean, in this case it's oil and gas, but it's still the same principle. I do actually think that the central government mad scheme to cover vast areas of the United Kingdom in solar panels as opposed to food production is completely the wrong priority. Yeah, okay. Four more. Right, cracking on. Jacob Reig from Bloomberg.
Is this on?
Yeah, you're there.
Do you think you can deliver on your NHS promises with the current devolved powers and under the current model for the NHS? And what would you say to people who want reform to really look bigger at, for example, a French-style insurance healthcare system?
Well, I mean, that would be a national decision ahead of a general election. All I will say on the national side of it is there are one or two health trusts in England where they've managed, without huge increases in budgets, to massively increase delivery. And Our chairman, David Bull, is, of course, a former GP. And we're looking at best practice. We're looking at how is it some of these trusts with the same money are getting massively higher percentage output. So that's on the national level, and all that, and as I've said before, on the big UK picture of health, I'm prepared to consider any alternative to the failure we've got now. Yeah. And the failure is we've doubled expenditure and there are no more beds in the NHS over the course of the last 10 years. It's not working. As for devolved powers, I'll let Dan speak to that.
So there are too many health boards, in my opinion, in Wales, and it's fragmented, and there's duplication of management costs and back office as well. So there is a saving to be made there. One example is if you look at Manchester and the population there, and there's lots of similarities with Wales, but there is only one health board that covers that area, and yet we've got so many here. So I think that is an issue to look at. And actually, Nigel's example of some other health boards across the UK, where they're improving outcomes and reducing the budget. They're actually saving money by becoming more efficient. So I think what I think the money is there, £14 billion, is enough to spend on our health service, but it's not being spent properly. And as I said in my speech, we need to hold these chief executives and chief finance officers of health boards to account. And the health boards themselves need to work harder in that regard. And certainly there'll be more ministerial intervention if necessary to get health boards and to get hospitals performing. So I think there's a lot to be done there, and it needs to be done because 1 in 4 people in Wales are stuck on an NHS waiting list. Yeah. I think something like 20% of them have been waiting over 12 months. And you compare that to just a few percent in England, and yet we get more money per head to spend on health. So we really do need to turn it around in Wales, and with me and my Reform colleagues, we will have somebody who will have a very laser-sharp focus on this and be holding those executives to account. And if they don't get the results, they'll have to go. That's what happens in the private sector.
Sure is.
You should not be receiving a six-figure sum from the taxpayer and not delivering and tolerating failure in your organisation. That shouldn't happen. And it's the Welsh public sector as a whole. In my council, Caerphilly Council, where council tax is going up 6% this year, there's been a whole section of senior officers having six-figure payouts and non-disclosure agreements being signed, or behind closed doors. This kind of thing happens in the Welsh public sector, and it needs to stop. And if we need to pass legislation to retrospectively change contracts, we will do it. We will take the action.
Pretty good. Elizabeth Piper from Reuters.
If you were betting men, and I'm not saying that you are.
Oh, I am. Don't worry about that.
To be betting men.
Cheltenham next week. Yeah, go on.
Would you put money on a Reform victory in Wales, and how much? Or, as some in your party say, is the better result to win the popular vote, come second, and then you don't need to govern a very difficult situation?
Oh, what a cynical mind. Cynical.
That is not the best result for Wales. That is not the best result for Wales. Wales needs reform to win and to be in government. Otherwise, it will not get the real change that it deserves.
Yeah, very good.
This is not a game. This is not a bet. This is serious. Wales is in a mess and it needs to be fixed. So we are campaigning to win and to sort out Wales.
Very good. Very good. No, I agree with that. I agree with that. Although, Elizabeth, if you had any thoughts on the Gold Cup next Friday at Cheltenham, I'd be very, very keen to know. Right, two more. Reeve Nesbitt-Marr from the Herald Wales and Pembrokeshire Herald.
Mr. Thomas, Wales cannot actually control immigration because it's decided by Westminster. So what concrete policy would Reform introduce in Wales to end the nation of sanctuary approach?
You're quite right. We don't control immigration. The UK government and border force is meant to be doing that, and they're not. We understand that, but things like the nation of sanctuary, it is appalling. Do you remember before the 2024 general election, there were news crews over in Calais and France interviewing illegal immigrants, and they were saying they were hoping for a Labour government. They watch, they actually understand what's going on in British politics, and when they see things like the nation of sanctuary and that we welcome illegal asylum seekers and small boat people, it's a draw factor. So we will end that. We will publicly state we will end that immediately, and we will also stop illegal immigrants and asylum seekers being housed in Wales in whatever form. And as I say, if we need to change legislation to do that, we will.
Yep.
So we will stand up, if necessary, to the UK government on this. Even though we can't control immigration ourselves, of course, we understand that. That is not a devolved matter. We will do all we can to frustrate the process. And that is the one big fight we will pick with Westminster, if need be. Because we don't want to get into the arguing with Westminster in Wales. We want to carry on in Wales, running the Welsh government, using the levers we've already got to improve the lives of Welsh people. But that is one matter in which we will fight the government.
Philip from Farmers Weekly asked about trust, didn't he, earlier? Why should farmers trust you? There is no issue greater than illegal immigration where the bond of trust between the governors and the governed is more under stress than this. Every single Prime Minister since David Cameron says if you come to Britain illegally, you will be deported. Stop the boats, Rishi, Boris, all the rest of it, smash the gangs here, and none of it has amounted to a row of beans. And the public are really angry, and they want action on this. They really do. Okay. Last question, Bethan McKernan from The Guardian.
Is this on?
Yep.
So before today, we didn't actually have that much detail on what Reform would be planning, was promising for Wales. But we did have a promise from you, Mr Farage, last summer on your visit to Port Talbot, when you said that you would turn the blast furnaces back on at Tata Steel and you would reopen Wales's coal mines. So I'm wondering, from both of you, why that is missing from today's launch, and then also if you could expand a bit on what working with Westminster to protect strategic national industries means. Is that specific to Port Talbot and to Wales, or is that national? It's not very clear from the policy. Thanks.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting a mass reopening of the pits in the valleys of Wales, although many in the press had a lot of fun at my expense with it. What I did say was there was an anthracite, or a coking coal mine in Cumbria, which was needed to keep the Scunthorpe plant going. So why import the blooming stuff from Australia when we could have produced it in Cumbria, and that principle would apply in Wales or anywhere else? On the blast furnaces, I think there's no doubt that if Richard Tice and I had not been up to Scunthorpe on that Thursday afternoon, that the factory would have been closed, and it led to the first Saturday sitting of Parliament for 43 years. I'm proud of the fact that at least that is still open, but we haven't found a way forward. I think the blast furnace being turned off at Port Talbot was a disaster. You'll be told, oh, it's okay. The ARC recycling plant will be open soon. With our electricity prices, I guarantee you it will never, ever be turned on. So what I said about steel in Wales, the devolved administration just has not got that muscle and power to do it. It is a matter of national policy. What we have said on energy is we'll encourage and work with on nuclear, etc. So, that genuinely is something that Senedd on its own can't do. But I would suggest that it's something we need to have a national conversation about. The world is in the most dangerous place that it's been for over 3/4 of a century. And security of supply of key industrial materials, food, energy sources, all of these things are going to become the politics of the future. And right at the moment, Bethan, the UK is in a pitifully weak place. All right.
And my understanding is the electric arc won't be able to produce the very highest quality steel that's needed for secondary steel. So there is that. But we will appoint a dedicated Minister for Industry to look at our Welsh industry and see what can be invested in to grow. We have to be realistic with this, but I think certainly working with the UK government on shared strategic objectives. We all want energy bills to be lower in this country, and there are areas in Wales where there are already nuclear plants. There's a precedent for it, and we should be looking at that, in my opinion. We're not spending £300 million on expensive green subsidies. We should crack on with enabling and making life easier for those who want to invest. For instance, Rolls-Royce, who want to maybe build modular nuclear reactors. I think that's the kind of thing we should be looking at. We've got limited powers there devolved to us, but we will do what we can in the to prepare, whether it's planning, that kind of thing, access, infrastructure. We can focus on that. And who knows, perhaps it is a conversation, if need be, if this becomes a success, where we speak to the UK government and say, well, actually give us some more powers on that. But we're not going from day one to start asking for more powers. Let's fulfill our potential first.
Let me round things off. Good. Thank you, all of you. Thank all of you for coming this morning, supporting our manifesto launch. Some fresh ideas, some big ideas, and a great leader for Reform Wales in Dan Thomas. You've got to take that with us.
statement and the advice that he has given my constituents and everybody else. But there's just two issues I wanted to raise with him. We asked the FCDO yesterday about vulnerable travellers, and they said people who identify as vulnerable should highlight this to the FCDO, but they weren't able to give guidance on what would be classed as vulnerable, and I feel that that would be really helpful. Obviously, what steps are he taking to